Shalom Israel, it's Kazawan. I'm doing this video because after I did the video proving that Ruth was an Israelite, I got a lot of questions from people asking me about Rahab the Harlot. So I'm going to deal with her in this video. Now, let me start by saying this very clearly. Rahab the Harlot was not an Israelite. She was a Canaanite. But that creates a huge problem that has to be cleared up. The problem is this. The common teaching out there is that Rahab the Harlot is listed in the genealogy of the Messiah, and that is not true. Now, we're going to look at the verse in Matthew chapter 1 that I'm talking about, and then we're going to prove that the person in that verse is not talking about Rahab the Harlot, contrary to popular belief. So let's read it. Matthew 1:5. It says, "And Salmon begot Boaz of Rachab, and Boaz begot Obed of Ruth, and Obed begot Jesse." Now, notice it says Salmon begot Boaz of Rachab. Now, people are saying that this woman, Rachab, in this verse is actually talking about Rahab the harlot. So this is what I want to deal with in this video, because what they're saying is that Rachab is just the Greek way of saying Rahab. And since the New Testament is written in Greek, the translators put Rachab instead of Rahab. That's the argument that's out there. So what I want to do is show you that this woman named Rachab in the genealogy of the Messiah is not the same person as Rahab the harlot. So let's begin. Here we go. Now, if you don't know the story of Rahab the harlot, here it is in a nutshell. Joshua was leading the Israelites, and they were about to take over the land of Canaan. The first place in the land of Canaan that they were going to take over was Jericho. Now, at that time, Jericho was full of Canaanites, and Rahab the harlot lived in Jericho. She was a Canaanite prostitute. Let me show you that before we move on. Joshua 2:1. "And Joshua, the son of Nun, sent out of Shittim 2 men to spy secretly, saying, 'Go view the land, even Jericho.' And they went and came into an harlot's house named Rahab and lodged there." So we see that the 2 Israelite spies went to Jericho, and then they went into Rahab's house. Now notice that the first time Rahab is mentioned in the Bible, she is referred to as a harlot. Keep that in mind as we move on. Verse 2. "And it was told the king of Jericho, saying, Behold, there came men in hither tonight of the children of Israel to search out the country. And the king of Jericho sent unto Rahab, saying, Bring forth the men that are come to thee, which are entered into thine house, for they be come to search out all the country. And the woman took the 2 men and hid them, and said thus, There came men unto me, but I wist not whence they were. And it came to pass about the time of the shutting of the gate, when it was dark, that the men went out. Whither the men went, I wot not. Pursue after them quickly, for ye shall overtake them." So she told the Canaanite king, she said, 2 men did come to my house, but they left. I don't know where they went. When it got dark, they went out the gate. But if you hurry up, you probably could catch them. So basically, she lied for the Israelite spies. Watch this in verse 6. "But she had brought them up to the roof of the house, and hid them with the stalks of flax, which she had laid in order upon the roof." So Rahab the harlot hid these 2 Israelite spies from the Canaanite king, and because she did that, they end up making a deal with her that when they come back to take over Jericho, they would spare her life and her family's life. This is Joshua 6:17. "And the city shall be accursed, even it," talking about Jericho, "and all that are therein, to the Lord. only Rahab the harlot shall live, she and all that are with her in the house, because she hid the messengers that we sent. So that was the deal that they made. Now let's go down to verse 21. Here it is. And they utterly destroyed all that was in the city, both man and woman, young and old, and ox, and sheep, and ass, with the edge of the sword. But Joshua had said unto the two men that had spied out the country, Go into the harlot's house, and bring out thence the woman, and all that she hath, as ye swear unto her. And the young men that were spies went in and brought out Rahab, and her father, and her mother, and her brethren, and all that she had. And they brought out all her kindred, and left them without the camp of Israel. So as you can see, they kept their word, and they spared her life, and her family's life also. So that's the story of Rahab the harlot. She did a great thing for Israel, and they rewarded her by letting her live. But there was no part of that story that said anything about her marrying an Israelite and moving into the camp and starting a family. That's not in the story at all. But that's what some people say happened. See, but the scripture does not say that. As a matter of fact, the scripture says the exact opposite. Rahab the harlot and her family wasn't even allowed to come inside the camp of Israel. Let's look at this closely now. Joshua 6:23. And the young men that were spies went in and brought out Rahab, and her father, and her mother, and her brethren, and all that she had. And they brought out all her kindred, listen to this, and left them without the camp of Israel. Meaning they left them outside the camp. They left Rahab outside the camp. Yes, they let her stay in the land, but she could not come inside the camp where Israel was. She was not allowed inside the camp. Why? Deuteronomy 23:10. If there be among you any man that is not clean by reason of uncleanness, that chanceth him by night, then shall he go abroad out of the camp. He shall not come within the camp. So if an Israelite was unclean or became unclean for any reason, he couldn't even be in the camp. He had to get out the camp until he was clean again. Why? Let's go down to verse 14. It says, For the Lord thy God walketh in the midst of thy camp to deliver thee, and to give up thine enemies before thee. Therefore shall thy camp be holy, that he see no unclean thing in thee, and turn away from thee. See, the Most High walked in the midst of the camp of Israel, so the camp had to remain holy. So there's no way that a Canaanite harlot came up in the camp and married an Israelite. There's no way. Notice in verse 14 that it says, Therefore shall thy camp be holy. So let's see what the word holy means. Here it is. It's the Hebrew word kodash, and it means sacred, holy, holy one, saint, set apart, meaning separate. That's why they left Rahab the harlot outside the camp, set apart or separated from Israel, because the camp had to be holy. She could be in the land, but she couldn't come into the actual camp. See, Rahab the harlot did not marry an Israelite. You won't find that anywhere in the scriptures. Now, let's go back to Matthew 1:5 and read it again. It says, And Salmon begot Boaz of Rachab, and Boaz begot Obed of Ruth, and Obed begot Jesse. So again, people say that this woman, Rachab, is talking about Rahab the harlot. But this verse actually proves that this is not talking about Rahab the harlot. Here's what I mean. Now, on your screen, you see a list of Old Testament verses dealing with Rahab. Notice that all these verses refer to her as a harlot. Look at the highlighted sections of these verses. Joshua 2:1 says, "And came into an harlot's house named Rahab." Joshua 6:17 says, "Only Rahab the harlot shall live." Joshua 6:22, "Go into the harlot's house." Joshua 6:25 says, "And Joshua saved Rahab the harlot." See, the reason why it keeps saying Rahab the harlot is so that you can identify who it's talking about. Rahab the harlot is a title that allows you to know exactly who the Bible is talking about. That's important because when you go to the New Testament, you can easily identify the same Rahab by the title that was given to her in the Old Testament. For example, here she is in the New Testament. This is Hebrews 11:31. It says, "By faith the harlot Rahab perished not with them that believed not, when she had received the spies with peace." See, there's no question that this is the same Rahab. Here's another one in the New Testament. James 2:25. "Likewise also, was not Rahab the harlot justified by works when she had received the messengers and had sent them out another way?" Now, again, this is the New Testament we're reading, and she is still being called Rahab the harlot, because that allows you to know it's talking about the same Rahab the harlot from the Old Testament. Now, the book of Matthew is in the New Testament also. So let's go to Matthew 1:5 and read it again. It says, "And Salmon begot Boaz of Rachab, and Boaz begot Obed." Now wait, we just read in two different New Testament books where it said Rahab the harlot. But here in the book of Matthew, it says, "And Salmon begot Boaz of Rachab." Why doesn't it say Rahab the harlot here in this verse? You can't say, oh, they just changed the spelling because it's the New Testament. Because we just read 2 times in the New Testament where they used the name Rahab. If this woman in the Messiah's genealogy was Rahab, then it would at least have said Rachab the harlot so that we could identify who she is. But it doesn't say that. Why? Because this woman, Rachab, in the genealogy of the Messiah is not Rahab the harlot. That's why. This is a different woman. Now we're going to go a little deeper. Stay with me, y'all. We're going to prove that this name Rachab is not the same name as Rahab, in case you still don't see it. Let's prove even further that Rachab is not just the Greek spelling of the name Rahab, as some people say. Let's look at Joshua 6:25 one more time. I want to focus on the first part only. It says, "And Joshua saved Rahab the harlot alive." Okay, now let's look at this verse in Greek. Here it is on the screen. Now, I don't expect you to be able to read this, but I just want you to look at it so I can show you something. When you look at verse 25, notice that it says, Kai Ra'ab. This word Ra'ab is Rahab. So we know now that the name Rahab in the Greek is Ra'ab, R-A-A-B. Now, even though this is an Old Testament verse, which was written in Hebrew, we're actually reading the Greek version of the Old Testament. So we're dealing strictly with the Greek, so that when we go to the New Testament, which was written in Greek, there shouldn't be any drastic spelling changes for the same name. In other words, if we read the name Rahab from the Old Testament in Greek, it should be the same name in the New Testament in Greek, because it's all Greek. So in Joshua 6:25, we see that Rahab is Ra'ab. Now, let's go to Hebrews chapter 11, verse 31 in Greek. Here it is. This one is easier to understand because you can see the English written under the Greek. Now, here you see the name Rahab, and above it, it says Ra'ab, just like we saw when we looked at Joshua 6:25 in the Greek. Hebrews 11 and 31 has the same name, Ra'ab, R-A-A-B. And right above it, you see the Greek letters, the Greek way of spelling Rahab or Ra'ab. Now, let's go to James 2:25 in the Greek. Here it is. And again, you see the name Rahab, and right above it, Ra'ab, R-A-A-B. And above that, you see the same Greek spelling for Rahab or Ra'ab as we saw before. Now remember, this is all Greek. So let's go to Matthew 1 and 5 and look at the name written in the genealogy of the Messiah. Now, if it's the same spelling or the same Greek letters, then you could say that this is Rahab the Harlot. But if it's a different spelling and a different name, you have to admit that it's a whole different person, because we've been dealing with the Greek only in the Old and the New Testament. So there is no reason for the name to be spelled different. The translation excuse does not apply because we've been looking only at the Greek. So if it's a different name, you have to admit that it's a different person. Here we go. Matthew 1 and 5 in the Greek. Now, when you read the English, it says Salmon begot Boaz of Rachab. And when you look above it, it says Rachab. Notice that it doesn't say Ra'ab like it did before in the other verses. And when you look above that at the actual Greek writing, you can see that the spelling is different. Here are the two names side by side. Ra'ab, which is Rahab, and Rachab, which is Rachab. These are two different names. Therefore, you have to conclude that these are two different women. There's no translation going on because this is all Greek. So Rahab the harlot is not listed in the genealogy of the Messiah. Solomon did not marry her. Solomon married an Israelite woman named Rachab. I mean, that's pretty much it. We just went through the scriptures in English and verified it in the Greek. I hope you can see it. And with that, I say, Shalom.